Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. Good effort, Meg. Today we are returning to Crochet Cafe, and again I'm doing kind of a semi-tutorial crochet along kind of video, just teaching you some of the basics for the pattern that I'm going to be using today. And that is, we are going to be making Eevee. So I will leave a link to the pattern down below in the description, but without further ado, let's get started. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our amazing community. So for the color yarns that we're going to use for Eevee, you're going to need a not quite brown color yarn. So I just picked this one up off of Amazon, and it is in the color Camel. And then this is some leftover yarn that I had in a not quite white color. It's kind of like a cream. The pattern calls for brown felt material, but I already had black on hand, so I know it's not going to be exact, but I just wanted to use what I had. As with most of my amigurumi projects, you're going to need some safety eyes. I'm going to be using a 3.125 crochet hook. I have a tapestry needle for sewing at the end, a few stitch markers. One unique thing about this project is you're going to need a metal wire brush or a pet brush. So I cleaned out this brush. It's Penny and Tyson's comb. I'm not too worried about using this for this project, since I don't intend on gifting this to somebody. So again, just using what I had on hand, but you're gonna need a metal brush. I have my handy dandy yarn bowl. And lastly, you're gonna need some polyester polyfill material. Okay, so we're gonna get started on the head first. And to do that, we're gonna start with a magic ring. So I always start with placing the yarn like this over the back of my 3 fingers. And then you bring the leading edge down and you make an X across and then pull down again. And so you have 2 parallel pieces of yarn on this side and an X on this side. And I just kind of hold the leading yarn with my thumb. You're gonna take your hook, you're gonna go under, over, and you're just gonna drag it through, then twist. So now you can see it is on the hook like so. You're going to pinch it using your fingers like this, so that way it doesn't fall apart. You're going to grab the leading edge of the yarn. You're going to yarn over, kind of switch fingers there, and pull through. There you go. So that's how you start the magic ring. So this is where we left off. So we're going to put our hook through this opening right here, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. There you go. And we're going to do that 5 more times. So put your hook through, yarn over, pull through. So if I turn my piece like this, you should be able to count. So we're not counting this right here. That was our lock-in where I'm pointing with my right index finger. We're gonna start with this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then what I like to do is, before I tighten it, is I will put a stitch marker right there, and we're going to move it in just a moment. But that way, if you're new to this, you know exactly which stitch you're gonna start counting with. Then with this tail, we're just gonna pull, and it's gonna turn our piece into, and you can pull kind of hard too. You can see kind of flex in there. But now we have a little ring. So step 1 for making the head is done. Now, because we're working in the round, it's very easy, at least for me, to lose track of my starting and stopping stitch. So I always add my stitch marker here so I know where to stop. And because I'm gonna start this next round, I can take this guy out, set him to the side, and we're gonna start working increases in each of those 6 stitches. So an increase for this particular case is just 2 single crochets in the same stitch. There's one. Going into that same stitch, and that's 2. So we just did 1 increase. You can see it's 2 separate stitches. Don't forget to add your stitch marker to that final stitch, and always double check your count. So now we should have 12 stitches. So we just finished round 2. So now we're gonna do round 3. And this pattern will continue anywhere you see the little brackets, the square brackets in the pattern. So for instance, for round 3 in brackets, it says increase and then single crochet, which means in this first stitch, we're just gonna do an increase. And then we're gonna do a single crochet in this next stitch. Now we're going to repeat that sequence 6 times. So we just did 1, so that means we need to do it 5 more times. So that's the end of round 3. So now you know what those brackets mean in the pattern. Just remember that if something is not in brackets, that's just a single event. So I'll go along with round 4 as well with you. Then you should have all the tools in your toolbox to essentially get through this pattern until we get to the next point. So for round 4, we're gonna do a single crochet in this first stitch. And then it has some brackets. Now in these brackets, it says we're gonna work an increase in this next stitch. And then it says single crochet 2, which just means instead of like previously, we only worked the 1 single crochet, we're gonna work a single crochet in the next 2 stitches. And we're going to do that sequence 5 times. And that was 5 times. So you can see we still have these 2 stitches that have not been worked yet. And in the pattern, it says we're gonna do an increase in this stitch and a single crochet in this stitch. And there we have it. That's the end of round 4. So at this point, you essentially know how to work up the rest of the entirety of the pattern. So I'm going to continue on working this up, and I will pause to add commentary where I think some people might need a little assistance, but otherwise just keep working the pattern as written. So now I am ready to do just single crochets all around. This is for rounds 7 through 10. Piece of advice is to make little tick marks on a piece of paper, however you would like to track, just to make sure you don't lose track of what row you're on. These next couple of rounds are super simple, just single crochets in every single stitch that we've created thus far, so no increases and no decreases. So let's do that. So this is what it should look like after row 10. So now we're gonna switch it back up, but you already know how to do this round. And now we're gonna do 2 more rows of just the single crochets. Okay, so we just finished round 13, which is this round right here, this row of stitches. So now we want to put our safety eyes in. This is a good time to do so, but we're gonna do so between round 12 and 11. So making sure that you're gonna place them not here in this row, you're gonna put them in this row right here. And you can pretty much put them anywhere you want. You're just gonna count 7 stitches in between them. So while I'm doing this, I'm just gonna put a stitch marker in this loop so it doesn't accidentally unravel, and just pull it tight. And this I'll probably make the back of my piece, so I'm just going to flip over like that. So I know this is round 13, so that's 12 and that's 11. So I'm just going to, for the first eye, just pick a spot, let's say maybe right there. And then I'm just gonna count 7 stitches this way, or if you started here, count 7 stitches that way. So right there, I'm going to put the second eye, just like so. And now we are going to continue on. So if you're keeping track, we just finished row 13. So now we're gonna start on row 14. And I'm going to start by showing you guys how I do my decrease, which is the very first stitch. So for a decrease, we're just joining 2 stitches. And the traditional way is to go through both loops like this, but I found going through just the single loop like so closes up the decrease quite nicely. So split your stitch just like that, yarn over and pull through. So you have 2 loops on your hook, and then split the next stitch, yarn over and pull through. So you have 3 stitches on your hook, yarn over, and you're gonna pull through all 3 of these. And that's a decrease. So continue on with those 5 single crochets. And again, I'll show you that decrease. So split the stitch, yarn over, pull through, split the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all, and do that all the way around. Okay, so we are done crocheting the head of Eevee. So now what we want to do is make sure you pull quite a bit of extra yarn, is just snip off the tail like so. Now you can see this is where I stopped crocheting, and we're just going to pull that entire length that we just cut through like so. So now our piece will not unravel. It's fastened off and we left a tail for some. Okay, so now we're gonna get started on the body. So just like before, we're gonna begin with the magic ring. Since this is only our second time doing this, I'll go through it one more time. So start with a diagonal across the palm side of your fingers. Go straight down like so, make an X, and then bring it down on the other side. Then you are going to grab the tail, the leading edge of your yarn, and hold it against the palm side of your fingers with your thumb. Flip over so you have these 2 parallel pieces of yarn. Taking your crochet hook, go under and then over and pull that through. Then twist like so, pinch, remove from your hand, grab the leading yarn, yarn over and pull through that loop. And you now just started your magic ring. Now pinching these pieces of yarn, we're gonna begin by adding 6 stitches. So insert our hook here, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. And that's the first stitch. So we're gonna do this 5 more times. So we now have those 6 stitches, and now we can pull this tail and it'll make a nice little ring, just like that. And now for the body, we're just going to follow the pattern as written. I went through in detail, I think plenty during the crocheting of the head, that I think following through on the body will be pretty straightforward. So I'm just gonna kind of speed through this and stop anywhere where I think I might need to add some more detail. Okay, so now we finished with the camel color of the body, but now we want to do 2 rows of single crochet, but in the cream color. So I'm going to show you how I go about doing a color change. Since we're done with this camel color, I'm just going to kind of set it to the side. We're going to bring in this cream color yarn. So we are going to put our hook in the next stitch like so. So we have the camel color, and I'm just going to kind of tuck and hold with tension this camel color back here. Then I'm going to take the cream color yarn, with the tail behind, and I'm gonna loop it onto my hook like this. And I'm going to twist it a few times, like so. Okay, let me hold the yarn. And I'm just gonna pull that through like that. And now I'm going to yarn over and pull through just like a normal single crochet, just like that. So that's how I do my color changes. I'm sure other people have different techniques, but this is what has worked for me. And then what I do is on the next stitch where I yarn over and pull through is I try to capture the tail of the new color and the old color to kind of lock them in place. So all I have, kind of give you a top down to see there. So I kind of want to make sure it's like captured within. So I'm going to put my hook under both of those. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through. And you can see it kind of like ties it on the inside of the amigurumi. And then just yarn over and pull through just like a normal single crochet. And I'll do that like 2 or 3 times. So let's do it again. Let's just put our hook through the next stitch. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip off the camel colored yarn. And we don't need to leave a long tail with that one. But now we can just kind of tuck these tails on the inside so they don't get in the way, and we can continue on doing our single crochets without worrying about these coming loose. Now, just like before, now that we're finished with the body, I'm going to put a stitch marker into that final loop so I can pull a nice long tail for sewing, and I'm going to snip it off, and then we're going to pull that tail through, and there we have it. That is the body done. So now we're going to get started on the legs. So just like the previous 2 parts, we're starting with the magic ring. And then like before, we're gonna make sure we pull quite a long tail for sewing, snip it off, and pull it through. And that's one of our legs. So for the arms, we are again going to start with the magic ring. And we're going to cut our tail, pull the tail through, and there's one of our arms. Okay, so for Eevee's ears, again, we're gonna start with the magic ring, but this time we're only doing 4 stitches instead of the 6 as we've done on every other piece. And pulling a long tail. There's one of the ears, and then we want to press it flat, and we're done crocheting that. So now we are starting with the tail, and instead of starting on the camel color yarn, we're going to start with cream, and we are going to start with the magic ring. So I just finished row 5, and as we're working on round 6, we are going to transition to brown. So I'm going to show you how I do a color transition again. So just like before, we have the cream color, and we're going to be transitioning into the brown. So for the next stitch, I am going to insert my hook. I'm going to hold the tension of the cream with the tail on the right, wrap it on your hook, and then twist the tail around a couple times. And we're gonna pull through, just like that. Holding those tails with your fingers, yarn over and pull through, just like that. And since this is an increase, we're gonna do another one in that same stitch. And don't forget to capture those tails, because that will keep them from unraveling. So that's an increase. Then we have to do 3 single crochets. And again, I like to capture those tails for 2 to 3 stitches. And now I can snip these tails and keep working in the round. So I just finished round 11, and we are gonna wanna stuff the tail at this point, and then we'll do the final round and finish the tail off. And what I like to do at this point is try to get a little bit more stuffing in there, and I use the back of my crochet hook to kind of shove it in there. So here are all of the crochet pieces ready to be stitched together. We do have to do one more thing before we're ready to stitch everything. So let's get on to that. So what we are going to do now is take our crocheted ears, and just to save on my felt, I'm just gonna work in this top corner up here, and I'm just gonna use some chalk and trace the ears. And all we're really doing is making a smaller teardrop shape or leaf shape to cut out and glue onto the ears. So now I'm going to cut out those 2 smaller pieces. So here are my 2 felt pieces. So now I am going to glue these onto the ears. I would recommend you use like a fabric glue. I unfortunately ran out of fabric glue, so I am going to be using a glue stick. And here are my 2 ears. And now we're ready to start sewing. So I am first going to start with sewing the ears onto the head. I don't think there's a particular order you need to stitch all of this together, but this is just how I like to go about doing mine, is I usually do the ears first. Now from the top looking down, what I'm looking at is to make sure that roughly center here, and then what would be a 90-degree from there. And then looking at the picture from the pattern as reference, you can see this is about where the increases stop if I kind of push down on the head. So I'm gonna put my ears about here at this angle, and I'm gonna make sure that they're centered from the center stitch. And to do that, I'm just gonna hold it like so. And I always like to go with the stitches, so you can see my single crochets are going this direction, so I'm going to sew around in this direction, because I've noticed in the past when I've sewn against the stitch, this starts bunching up and you can tell it's definitely sewn together. I'm not the best at sewing with yarn, but that's just a little tip that has worked for me. So I start with kind of holding it where I want to put it, and I note where the front of the yarn is, and I just pick a spot. So that is roughly center there. So I'm just gonna lock it in right there. And again, I'm not the best at this. This is just the way I do it. So I always go up through the item that I'm sewing on, and then down into the base that it's being sewn to. Just like that. And you can tell that the tail of yarn that I left for sewing is much too long for this piece, but I just wanted to show you like that's okay. And I prefer having a longer tail, and I always try to split the stitches if I can. I just think it looks nicer. And because I want his ear to be sticking a little bit more up, I'm just gonna add an extra stitch to kind of pull it up. So a little bit higher on the ear. And now the fun part of trying to make it match on the other side. So his ears are sewn on. And I know they're not perfectly even or even at the same angle, and I thought about going back and fixing it, but honestly I think it's super cute the way that it is. So I'm gonna move on with now sewing the head to the body. So before we start stitching this part, we need to stuff both of these pieces partially. I will finish stuffing it once I get closer to closing both of those up, but that's just the way that I like to work. All I'm doing here is just essentially lining up these back two pieces, and because my stitches on the head are going this way, that's the direction that I want to work in. And because both the head and the body, the last round had 24 stitches, you know you can line up one for one. And the reason I like to sew the body and head together before I sew on the legs, the legs, arms, and tail is because it's really easy, at least for me, to accidentally like twist the body. And I've had it before where I've sewn on the head and the body after doing those items, and then I'm left with a twisted torso. And now that I'm mostly all the way closed, I'm gonna go ahead and finish stuffing both the head and the body. Now I'm going to finish stitching this all the way up. Super cute. So now that I have these attached, I can weave in all of these ends, and I will show you how to do that, but then that way we won't have this mess. And we're gonna start with the one that our needle is already on. So the way that I personally finish a stitch is I find a stitch of the same color and I kind of go like this. And again, I don't have an exact science for this. And I just go through one more time like so. And you're gonna pull it almost all the way through like that. And then I put my needle through the hoop like that. And it kind of makes like a little knot or something. And then I stab my needle all the way through. And this part can be tricky, but just like this. And I pull all of the excess yarn through. So you can see that's it right there. I'm gonna pull that through and I'm gonna pull a little bit more, and then I'm going to trim it as close like that. And there we go. So now we just need to do the legs, the arms, and the tail. So to start this part, we're gonna cut 24 lengths of yarn, and essentially they're going to be doubled up like so. We're gonna cut them longer than obviously we need, but we know roughly, I think I'm gonna cut double this length like this. So this is one length, and I'm gonna cut 24 of these. So we have our 24 pieces of yarn, and Eevee. And we're gonna take our crochet hook, and I'll start on the center one just so it'll be easy. And you can see that V right there of that stitch. So we're gonna be putting our crochet hook under that V and above that V, just like that. Then we're gonna take one of these pieces and we're gonna pull this yarn down through the stitch like this. And we're going to twist and pull these through. Make sure both ends go through. And you're gonna pull it taut like that. So that's what it's gonna look like. And you're gonna do this for all 24 stitches all the way around. So now that we attached all of these crazy strings, we are gonna take the metal brush and we're going to comb this out so it turns into fur, and then we will shape it with scissors. Okay, so now that I have combed out all the yarn, I am going to trim it and shape it. She's so freaking cute. So I'm super happy with the way that Eevee came out. She is super cute. I love like how fluffy her little mane is. I would say if you were planning to make Eevee for yourself or someone you love, probably put down like a placemat or something when you're trimming the fur, because it got everywhere after I was done. Well, I hope this video was helpful for you. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!